In this video, I'll demonstrate how you can simplify numeric user input by using the slider control that ships as part of the Microsoft Ajax Control Toolkit. So to get started, we'll fire up Visual Web Developer, create a new Ajax-enabled website, hop over to our default.asbx page, and the first thing that we're going to do is grab a couple of text boxes. So let's add a text box. I'm going to append a forced line break at the end, and then I'm going to add another text box, and we'll do the same. Actually, we'll put two of them there, just for a little bit of formatting. Now let's configure these text boxes to be something that's a little bit more meaningful from a naming conventions perspective. Call the first one Slider 1, right? And this will actually be the slider, the part that slides up and down. Second thing that we want to do is we want to configure a bound control that will become the recipient of the numeric value that's selected by the user by moving the slider up and down or back and forth. So let's call it Slider 1 bound control. That's actually the name of the XML attribute that's used. And we'll also specify a width property, and we'll just give that a width of 30. And now we can go over to our Ajax Control Toolkit tool tab that we created from the assembly DLL file, and go down and grab a slider extender, drop one of those onto the page, and now we can program the specific attributes that are going to be necessary to implement the slider control with the behavior that we're interested in. So the first thing we need to do is specify a behavior ID, and we'll just call this Slider 1, although you might choose to use one that's more context sensitive to the element of data that you're acquiring. Next, let's specify what the target control ID is. So this is the control ID that's going to become the slider. And we'll also name that Slider 1 because we specified Slider 1 as the name of that first text box. Next, we want to specify what the bound control ID is going to be. And in our case, we named that text box Slider 1 bound control. We also want to provide a little bit of guidance in terms of how this should appear. So the first thing we'll tell it is that we want the orientation to be, in this case, vertical. We'll do a vertical one first, and then we'll do a horizontal one with a couple of more advanced features. And the last thing that we'll add is let's enable handle animation, and we'll set that equal to true just to provide a little bit more user interface aesthetics. And now let's go ahead and run this. So notice we have our slider, default value equal to 0, and as we slide it, the value goes up from 0 to 100 and back down, and that's the default behavior. So to get started, it's that easy to add numeric user input using the slider extender control. But let's go ahead and implement a second slider extender control and make this one a little bit more of an advanced implementation. So again, let's grab a couple of text boxes, and we'll name them we'll name them Slider 2 and Slider 2 bound control. And for Slider 2 over here, let's add a default text value of 0. So let's set text equal to 0. The other thing that we want to do on Slider 2 here is let's add auto postback equal to true. So let's say we want to, whenever the value here changes, we want to automatically do a postback. Let's also below these two text boxes, so the slider and the bound control that will contain the value, let's add an update panel. So let's go in, grab an update panel from the Ajax Extensions tab here, and of course inside the update panel we're going to need a content template. So let's add that, And the other thing we're going to need is a triggers collection. So let's go add a triggers collection as well. Let's add an async postback trigger, and let's specify that the control ID that we're interested in triggering an update on is going to be slider 2, and the event name is going to be text changed. All right, so remember that this extender, the slider control extender, extends a text box. So when the value of that control changes, since the base object for this is a text box, it's going to be text changed. And of course, we need to be well-formed XML. Next, we can add to the content template here, and what we're going to do is just add an ASP.NET label, standard ASP.NET label control. So let's add one of those. Let's instead, though, call it something a little bit more meaningful. So let's call it update label update date. That's going to contain the update date and time. And instead of the word label, let's just start with a space. Next, let's go and add the second Ajax control extender for the slider. And let's grab these attributes, right? So we want the behavior to be slider 2, we want the target control to be slider 2, and we want the target bound control to be slider 2. We want orientation, however, to be horizontal. And let's add some other specifics about how we want this particular implementation of the slider control to appear. So the first thing we want to do is we'll specify that we want a minimum value, and rather than go from 0 to 100, let's make the range negative 100 to positive 100. So let's say that the minimum value is going to be negative 100, and the maximum value will be a positive 100. And let's say that we don't want to step one at a time. So instead, we'll do 5 steps at a time. Okay, now we're pretty much configured, but remember that we set up an update panel here, and we specified that when the slider control has a text change, we want to do a postback. And we've in our slider 2 control, we've set auto postback equal to true. So what we want to do is we want to update the text value that's in this label every time the value for the second slider changes. So in order to do that, let's generate a page load event for our page, and this will get triggered when the auto postback happens. And here we can add a little bit of logic that says if page is postback, so if this is a postback, then let's go ahead and populate that label field with, we'll add a little text prefix, changed at, and here we'll get date time dot now dot to long time string, right? And so that will cause us to populate the label update date label on the page with the current time. However, let's add one little bit more advanced feature here. Let's do this asynchronously, right? So let's say register asynchronous postback control, and let's register slider 2. All right. There we go. Check for any other typographic mistakes. Okay, let's go ahead and try it. So page fires up. note up. That's a literal. I guess we didn't really want that, but that's all right. So notice as we scroll here, now we go negative 100, negative 50, 0, 50, 100, and each time we make that slider selection, we get that page post back, and we update the content of that label with the current time. So that's it. It's that easy to use a slider control to create an easy-to-use and relatively error-free implementation of numeric input using the Ajax control toolkit.